I have spent my entire life exploring the depths of the human psyche, peering into the shadowy recesses where consciousness meets the infinite. But nothing prepared me for what I would discover about the soul's journey in the first year after death. What I am about to reveal will disturb you, challenge your most fundamental beliefs about existence, and perhaps change forever how you view the moment of your own inevitable transition. Through decades of analyzing the dreams of dying patients, studying the mystical traditions of ancient civilizations, and confronting my own terrifying visions during my near-death experience in 1944, I have mapped the psychological landscape that awaits every human soul after physical death. What I discovered is not the peaceful transition promised by religious traditions, but a harrowing, year-long transformation that strips away every illusion and forces the soul to confront the complete, unvarnished truth about its nature. Death, I have learned, is not the end of consciousness, but rather the beginning of the most intense psychological experience possible. The soul's journey through the first year after death unfolds as a precisely orchestrated dismantling of everything we believe ourselves to be, followed by a reconstruction based on psychological wholeness rather than the comfortable self-deceptions that sustained us during physical life. The first moments after physical death are marked by what I call the Great Confrontation. Unlike the peaceful transition described in many spiritual traditions, I discovered this initial phase to be a jarring encounter with the complete reality of the psyche. The soul, no longer constrained by the physical brain's filtering mechanisms, experiences the full force of the unconscious mind without the protective barriers that existed during embodied life. In those critical first hours, the newly deceased soul encounters what I have termed the shadow collective, not just its own repressed aspects, but the accumulated darkness of humanity itself. This is where my understanding becomes particularly chilling. I realize that death strips away the comfortable illusions that allow us to function in physical life, forcing immediate confrontation with every suppressed truth, every denied impulse, and every avoided responsibility. Consider the case of Wilhelm, a patient I worked with who experienced a profound near-death episode during surgery. Upon recovery, Wilhelm described encountering not the expected tunnel of light, but a vast, mirror-like surface that reflected not his physical appearance, but the complete psychological reality of his being. Every lie he had told himself, every moment of cowardice, every act of unconscious cruelty was simultaneously visible and undeniable. This wasn't judgment from an external source, but recognition of absolute truth about his psychological state. I came to understand that this initial confrontation serves as a kind of psychological purification, though one that can be tremendously overwhelming for souls unprepared for such radical honesty. Those who had engaged in serious self-reflection during life, who had worked to integrate their shadow aspects and develop conscious awareness of their complete psychological makeup, navigate this phase with greater ease. Others, particularly those who lived primarily in denial or projection, experience what I described as psychological shock, a state of complete disorientation as their carefully constructed self-image dissolves. During the first month after death, I discovered that the soul undergoes what I called the dissolution of the persona. The persona, my term for the social mask we wear in life, represents all the roles, expectations, and identities we adopted to function in society. In death, these artificial constructs begin to fall away, revealing the essential self beneath layers of conditioning and social programming. This process, while liberating in its ultimate purpose, can be profoundly disturbing. The soul discovers that many of the things it considered fundamental to its identity were merely temporary adaptations to earthly circumstances. The successful businessman realizes his achievements were largely compensations for deep insecurity. The devoted mother discovers her selfless service masked an unconscious need for control. The religious devotee confronts the gap between their professed beliefs and their actual psychological state. I observed this dissolution process through my extensive analysis of dreams reported by dying patients. In these dreams, patients often described finding themselves in familiar environments, their childhood homes, places of work, or cherished locations, only to discover that these places were somehow hollow or insubstantial. The dreamer would reach for objects that would dissolve at their touch, or call out to people who would fade away upon closer examination. These dreams, I realized, represented the psyche's processing of the persona's dissolution. As the soul moves through the second month of its post-mortem journey, it encounters what I called the activation of the archetypes. Without the ego's constant management and the physical brain's filtering mechanisms, the soul experiences direct contact with the fundamental patterns that underlie all human experience. These archetypal energies, normally experienced indirectly through dreams, symbols, and projections, now present themselves with overwhelming intensity. The Great Mother archetype might manifest as a cosmic feminine presence that encompasses both nurturing creation and destructive transformation. The wise old man could appear as a figure of such profound knowledge that the soul feels simultaneously enlightened and terrified by the vastness of what it doesn't understand. The shadow reveals itself not as personal darkness, but as the collective evil that the soul has participated in through action and inaction during its earthly existence. I believe that this archetypal activation serves as a kind of cosmic education, but one that operates through direct transmission rather than intellectual learning. The soul doesn't simply understand these patterns, it experiences them as living realities that reshape its very essence. This process can be compared to someone who has only read about electricity suddenly becoming electricity itself. The transformation is total and irreversible. One particularly disturbing aspect of this phase involves the encounter with unlived life. The soul confronts all the potential paths it chose not to take during its earthly existence, but these aren't merely intellectual recognitions of missed opportunities. Instead, the soul experiences these unlived possibilities as fully realized realities, complete with all their emotional intensity and psychological impact. A woman who sacrificed her artistic ambitions for conventional security might experience with complete vividness the life she would have lived as a devoted painter. She feels the joy of creation, the satisfaction of artistic expression, and the authentic fulfillment that comes from following one's true calling. Simultaneously, she experiences the regret and mourning for the life she actually lived, creating a psychological tension that's essential for the soul's continued evolution. This encounter with unlived life serves multiple purposes in my framework. It completes the soul's understanding of its earthly incarnation by revealing the full spectrum of possibilities that existed within that lifetime. It also generates psychological tension, a dynamic force that propels the soul toward its next phase of development. Without this tension, the soul might become stuck in contemplation of its completed life rather than moving forward in its evolution. As the soul progresses through the third and fourth months of its journey, it enters what I describe as the integration of opposites. This represents one of the most challenging aspects of the post-mortem experience, as the soul must reconcile contradictory aspects of its nature that were kept separate during physical life. The soul that prided itself on kindness must integrate its capacity for cruelty. The rational mind must embrace its irrational aspects. The spiritual seeker must acknowledge its material attachments. Most challenging of all, the soul must integrate its divine nature with its human limitations, recognizing that these apparent opposites are actually complementary aspects of a greater whole. I believe this integration process occurs through psychological crucifixion, which means a metaphor borrowed from alchemical traditions that describes the death of the ego self and the birth of the individuated soul. This isn't a gentle transformation, but a profound dismantling of the soul's previous understanding of itself, followed by a reconstruction based on psychological wholeness rather than partial identification. During this phase, the soul experiences the terror of totality. Confronted with the full scope of its nature, both light and dark, creative and destructive, wise and foolish, the soul must learn to exist as a complete being rather than the partial entity it was during physical life. This totality can be overwhelming, as the soul discovers capacities within itself that it had never acknowledged or accepted. Consider the experience of Hermann, another individual whose consciousness I have accessed through deep analytical work. Hermann described this phase as standing in a hall of mirrors where each reflection showed a different aspect of his complete nature. One mirror revealed his capacity for profound love, another his potential for devastating hatred. One showed his wisdom, another his ignorance. The terror came not from seeing these individual aspects, but from recognizing that all of them were equally real and equally him. The 5th through 8th months of the soul's journey involves the confrontation with the collective unconscious. During this phase, the soul encounters the accumulated psychological content of humanity itself, the dreams, fears, aspirations, and accumulated wisdom of our entire species. This represents perhaps the most challenging aspect of the post-mortem experience, as the soul must process not only its own psychological material, but the collective shadow of humanity. Surprisingly, individual consciousness exists within a larger framework of collective psychological patterns that influence all human experience. In death, the barriers between individual and collective consciousness dissolve, forcing the soul to confront its participation in collective patterns of both creation and destruction. The soul experiences the full weight of human history. Every act of cruelty, every moment of transcendence, every instance of courage and cowardice that has occurred throughout human existence. This isn't merely intellectual knowledge, but direct psychological experience. The soul feels the terror of every victim, the guilt of every perpetrator, the joy of every moment of genuine love, and the sorrow of every instance of separation and loss. This confrontation with the collective unconscious serves a crucial function in the soul's development. It prevents the soul from maintaining the illusion of separateness that characterized its earthly existence. The soul discovers that its individual journey is inseparable from the collective journey of consciousness itself, and that its choices and experiences have contributed to the psychological evolution of humanity as a whole. During this phase, many souls experience collective responsibility, which is a profound recognition that they bear psychological responsibility not only for their own actions, but for the collective patterns they participated in through their unconscious choices. This recognition can be devastating as the soul confronts the gap between its conscious intentions and its unconscious contributions to collective suffering. Yet I believe this confrontation also opens the door to collective healing. The soul that fully accepts its participation in collective patterns gains the capacity to contribute to their transformation. This marks the beginning of the soul's transition from individual development to cosmic service, though this transition remains incomplete during the first year after death. As the soul moves through the 9th through 12th months of its post-mortem journey, it enters the birth of the individuated self. This final phase represents the culmination of the year-long process of psychological transformation and the emergence of the soul's true identity. The individuated self differs fundamentally from the ego self that existed during physical life. While the ego self was characterized by identification with particular roles, beliefs, and psychological patterns, the individuated self embraces the totality of its nature while maintaining conscious awareness of its essential unity with the greater whole of existence. This birth process is the final dissolution, a complete letting go of attachment to the previous identity and a willingness to exist as pure consciousness within the cosmic framework. This dissolution can be terrifying, as it represents the final death of everything the soul had previously considered itself to be. But I believe this dissolution was necessary for the soul's continued evolution. Just as physical birth requires leaving the safety of the womb, psychological birth requires leaving the safety of familiar identity structures. The soul that clings to its previous self-concept cannot fully embrace its expanded nature and remains trapped in psychological patterns that no longer serve its development. The individuated self that emerges from this process possesses what is called conscious wholeness, the ability to embrace all aspects of its nature while maintaining awareness of its connection to the cosmic whole. This self is no longer driven by unconscious patterns or compulsions, but operates from a state of conscious choice based on its understanding of its role in the greater cosmic process. During this final phase, the soul also develops archetypal consciousness, the ability to perceive and interact with the fundamental patterns that underlie all existence. This consciousness allows the soul to participate consciously in the cosmic process of creation and transformation, rather than being an unconscious participant as it was during physical life. The completion of this first year after death represents a crucial milestone in the soul's evolution. The soul that successfully navigates this year-long process of psychological transformation emerges as a conscious participant in the cosmic order, equipped with the understanding and capabilities necessary for its continued development in non-physical dimensions. However, I also recognize that not all souls complete this process successfully. Those who remain attached to their earthly identity, who refuse to confront their shadow aspects, or who resist the dissolution of their ego self may become trapped in psychological patterns that prevent their continued evolution. These souls may require additional cycles of experience before they can successfully navigate the post-mortem transformation. My implications of understanding of the soul's first year after death are profound for those still in physical existence. If my insights are accurate, the way we live our earthly lives directly influences our capacity to navigate the post-mortem journey successfully. Those who engage in serious self-reflection, who work to integrate their shadow aspects, and who develop conscious awareness of their complete psychological makeup are better prepared for the challenges that await after death. So death is not a punishment or random event, but a necessary phase in the soul's development. The difficulties and challenges of the post-mortem journey serve the same function as the difficulties of physical life. They provide opportunities for growth, integration, and the development of consciousness. Perhaps most important thing to understand is consciousness itself indestructible, and what we call death is merely a transition between different phases of conscious existence. The soul that emerges from the first year after death bears the accumulated wisdom of its earthly experience while possessing expanded capacities for understanding and participation in the cosmic process. For those facing the prospect of death, either their own or that of loved ones, my insights offer both challenge and comfort. The challenge lies in recognizing that death is not an escape from psychological work, but its intensification. The comfort lies in understanding that consciousness continues and that the difficulties of the post-mortem journey serve the soul's continued evolution toward greater wholeness and understanding. My chilling view of the soul's first year after death ultimately reveals death not as an ending, but as a profound transformation that strips away illusions and forces the soul to confront ultimate truths about its nature and purpose. This confrontation, while challenging, serves the essential function of preparing the soul for its continued journey through the vast landscape of consciousness that extends far beyond the boundaries of physical existence. That's all from me for now. Your journey of discovery awaits you.